Hi, it's Patricia Coughlin, and I wanted to talk to you today about the relationship between rupture and repair cycles and the corrective emotional experience. I've had a number of cases presented to me in supervision recently that have highlighted the missed opportunities and mistakes, right, when it comes to dealing with ruptures to the alliance. And I've also had a couple experiences myself of handling these ruptures in such a way that a corrective emotional experience is actually facilitated. So when there is a rupture in the alliance, we have to first look at what aspect of the alliance is in question or has broken down. Is there, in fact, no agreement about the goal or the task? Or is it that there's been an emotional rupture of some sort? So obviously your repair attempts have to be calibrated to the nature of the rupture. So I'm thinking of one case in which a patient was actually very forthright with the therapist about the fact that their work together had not been effective. She was letting him know that it really hadn't helped her. Now, this is extraordinarily important to pay attention to. If somebody says, and she wasn't being, nasty or critical of him, patients might really enjoy talking to you, but still not be getting therapeutic benefit. And so she was saying, look, I have to let you know I'm still really depressed. All the pain in my body is still there. And the work they had been doing had not been effective. He didn't address the content of that at all, didn't try to understand it, and then come to some new agreement about the task, right? How they were going to work together. And so he made the mistake of just looking at how she felt toward him, given that he hadn't been helpful to her. So even though that might be useful at some point, you must first deal with the issue at hand, right? I'm so glad you're telling me. Let's look at, what's working, what isn't. Obviously, we're here to get you relief, right? So you want to get that clear first and come to agreement then on how you're going to do things differently. Then, if necessary, you'd go to, I wonder how you're feeling toward me, that I haven't helped you so far. But again, in this case, the content was completely ignored. And this is, according to research, one of the biggest problems with rupture is that the therapist does not own their part of it. They tend to just see whatever the breakdown is as sort of the patient's fault. And you can imagine, right, that that's not going to go very well. So you really want to understand the patient's point of view, what has gone wrong, and what can you shift to, in fact, get a therapeutic outcome. That's what you're looking for. So again, in this case, that was completely ignored. He just kept pressuring her, how do you feel toward me, given that I haven't helped you? And even then she said, I just don't see the point of me coming in here and just talking every week about how I'm feeling towards you. I mean, I have problems in my life that I need help with. Again, she's trying to correct course. She's giving him feedback about how they could get back in alignment, but he completely ignored it. And again, just kept pressing her, how do you feel toward me? She eventually complied, right, and went through a portrait of rage, but it got nowhere. She ended up leaving the session in a very hopeless state. So this is a recipe for misalliance and dropout. So whether it's, again, you're not agreeing about the goal or the task, or there's been some emotional rupture. I'm thinking of a couple of my own cases where in a trial therapy, with a man who was extraordinarily passive and compliant. I mean, really to the point where he was quite masochistic and encouraged other people to just take over and use him and abuse him. And I was really highlighting how he was already inviting me to do the same, and that I had no interest in that. But I really upped the pressure and I challenged him at the end, and I spoke about all the other treatments he had had and the fact that he was 65 years old and so on. And so in the next session, this very passive man who had denied having any negative feelings toward me in the first session was brave enough to say, look, I need to tell you, I actually felt really irritated at the end of our last session when, you pointed to my age and as if, that meant I didn't want to get better and I wasn't motivated. And so I really acknowledged that, right? I said, wow, yeah, so you really heard me casting doubt on you and your motivation. And so again, I thought, once that was acknowledged, I wanted to facilitate the experience of the anger toward me. But he said, wow, the fact that you listened, you tried to understand my point of view, you didn't, challenge me around that or tell me if I didn't like it, I could leave. Like he was expecting a negative response from me. And so the fact that I didn't do that and that he was actually able to speak up appropriately without excessive anxiety or defense, right? You'd have to ask yourself, well, why would you go to a portrait in that case, right? He's already doing, right, the healthy thing to do, right, with anger, which is speak up, right, and assert yourself. And in fact, he was so moved by the fact that I acknowledged this and how that would come across and how that would feel to him. He got very teary and said, gosh, I've never had this kind of experience before. Other people would want to make him wrong or get into an argument. And it facilitated a really profound corrective emotional experience. So you can turn, right, a breakdown and a rupture, not just repair it, but do it in such a way, right, that really solidifies the alliance and creates a corrective experience, right? And I had another case recently where I had raised my fee and the patient really had a reaction to it, but she was retreating to her typical defenses of getting kind of weepy and helpless. And so I said, really encouraged her. I said, look, I raised the fee. I mean, that's a fact. And it looks like you're having, feelings about that, and let's discuss it. And she was like, oh, we can discuss it, right? So in her mind, relationships are really just about one person, right, getting their way and the other person sucking it up. And so the fact that I said, well, let's discuss it. What's the deal? I mean, I didn't know anything about her financial situation. And so being able to discuss it, having me take her not just perspective, but situation into consideration. She didn't have any insurance. And so we negotiated and came up with a compromise around the increase. So again, this was extremely corrective on many levels. So you want to acknowledge that, you've actually done something, right? You challenged somebody, and it's not about right or wrong. Again, you want to be a model of how to relate in a healthy way. And as Terry Real, the fabulous couples therapist, talks about, when it comes to relationships, right and wrong has no place. I mean, arguing about who's right, who's wrong, everybody's going to lose. You just want to understand, right, the person's perspective and see, can you make room for two people in the relationship? And that's what we ended up doing in this case. We considered both of our needs and came up with a solution that took both into account. And that was very corrective on many levels. So make sure, again, when there's a breakdown, that you really understand the nature, right, of the misunderstanding or the rupture. You acknowledge your responsibility, what actually happened, and only then, once it's corrected, look at the feelings, right, that got stirred up in that whole sequence. Okay, so I hope this is helpful and I look forward to your feedback. Bye bye.